A land bank laughed at a 10-year-old girl's colored pencil map and bought every parcel around her grandfather's tiny pear orchard. Then they spent almost 40 years trying to make her disappear. What they never understood was that Mara Whitcomb had not drawn the land wrong. She had drawn the one part of it they could not see. The call came at Sauzo Chin on a wet Thursday morning. Graham Voss had been a development attorney for 22 years. He had argued highway takings, rezoning fights, drainage disputes, and 3 condemnation hearings before breakfast. He did not scare easily, but when he picked up the phone, his voice sounded like paper tearing. The project was frozen. $412 million of resort permits, hotel financing, grading crews, retail leases, stormwater approvals, and state entrance agreements all stopped on one sentence from the county access office. No legal access from Route 18 confirmed, not denied, not delayed, not under review. No legal access, and the reason was not a protest group, not a judge, not an endangered bird, not a missing signature. It was a 12-foot strip of grass running beside 73 pear trees behind a white farmhouse nobody at Ridgeway Land Trust had bothered to photograph. Mara Whitcomb answered on the second ring. She was 62 years old. She was already dressed. Her coffee had been sitting untouched beside a yellow legal pad since 5 that morning. Graham said, "Mrs. Whitcomb, we need to talk about your frontage." Mara looked out through the kitchen window. The orchard was gray in the rain. The trees stood bare and patient, each one tied to a stake her grandfather had cut by hand before she was born. She said, "No, Mr. Voss, you need to talk about your missing road." Then she set the receiver down on the table, not to hang up, just long enough to let him hear the room go quiet. After a moment, she picked it back up. "Come Monday," she said. "My daughter will be here. Bring the people who can sign." Then she ended the call and looked at the orchard. She had been waiting for that phone call since 1978. Rewind to May of 1965. The Cedar County surplus auction was held in the livestock hall at the fairgrounds. The place still smelled like sawdust, coffee, and rain on wool coats. 3 folding tables sat at the front. A chalkboard listed parcel numbers. Maybe 40 people came through the door, but only 6 had money to bid. Silas Whitcomb sat in the 3rd row with his hat in both hands. He was 74. He owned 8 acres, a farmhouse, and a pear orchard that looked useless to anyone who measured value by acreage. For 2 years, Sylvan National Bank had tried to buy him out. First polite letters, then higher offers. Then visits from men who stood too close to the fence and talked about progress like it was weather. Silas said no every time. So the bank stopped asking. They started buying everything else. Mara sat beside him with a school notebook on her lap and a tin of colored pencils under her elbow. The night before, she had copied every boundary Silas could remember. Blue for the creek, green for the pear rows, brown for the rail fence, red for the thin lane that used to run from Route 18 to the old mill road before the county let the weeds take it. She did not know why that red line mattered. She only knew her grandfather had made her draw it twice. Victor Sloan arrived late. He was Sylvan's regional land officer. Navy raincoat, polished shoes, leather case. A smile sharp enough to make the room arrange itself around him. He signed in at the front table, looked over the crowd, and saw Mara's notebook. "What's that supposed to be?" he said. Mara held the page down with one palm. "A map," she said. Sloan leaned in, looked at the colored lines, and laughed. Not softly. The whole room heard it. "A bank survey in school pencils," he said. "Well, I guess we're all professionals today." A few people laughed because Sloan had laughed first. Silas did not move. He bent toward Mara and spoke so quietly his breath moved the corner of the page. People laughed loudest at the line they missed. Mara wrote the sentence on the back of the map before she understood it. Then she folded the page and put it inside her coat. Sloan bought the surrounding holdings before noon. 6,900 acres, pasture, timber, creek bottom, fallow fields, all of it wrapped around Silas Whitcomb's orchard like a fist closing around a coin. He shook hands with 2 county officials, signed a stack of transfers, and carried his leather case toward the door. As he passed Silas, he said, "Enjoy your island." Silas waited until the door shut. Then he stood, took Mara's hand, and walked her out to the truck. On the ride home, the only sound was the heater ticking under the dashboard. That night, Silas spread 3 papers on the kitchen table: his 1951 deed, a county survey plat, and a state notice with a cracked blue stamp across the top. Mara's mother, Ruth, poured coffee and did not ask questions. In that house, explanations came when they were ready. Silas told us once, not hard, just once. "The land isn't always where men point," he said. "Sometimes it's where paper points after they stop looking." Mara looked at her colored pencil map. The red line crossed the top of the orchard, thin as thread. She still did not know what it meant, but she knew Victor Sloan had made a mistake in that room. Not a loud mistake, a quiet one. The kind that needs years before it has teeth. By October of 1977, Mara knew exactly what her grandfather had tapped. Silas had died 2 winters earlier. He left Mara the farmhouse, the pear trees, the taxes, the fence posts, and a cedar box full of papers tied with cotton string. Most people would have opened that box once, seen old receipts and brittle plats, then put it away. Mara did not put it away. Every Wednesday after work, she drove to the Cedar County Records office and sat under fluorescent lights that hummed like insects. She learned the recorder's index system. She learned which cabinets were alphabetized and which ones were only pretending to be. She learned that land records were less like a library and more like a kitchen drawer where 3 generations had tossed keys. The page that changed everything was filed in the transportation releases, not in the deed books. State Road Spur 7C, surveyed in 1954, funded in 1956, canceled in 1958. The road was supposed to connect Route 18 to the northern edge of what later became Sylvan's Saungan Chinchem acres. It was never paved. The county graded part of it once. Then the mill closed, the appropriation died, and the corridor vanished into weeds. That happened all the time. What did not happen all the time was the reversion clause buried at the bottom of the release. 12 lines, plain language. When the state abandoned the planned spur, the reserved right-of-way reverted to the adjacent owner of record on the cancellation date. On the cancellation date, the adjacent owner was Silas Whitcomb, which meant the 12-foot corridor, running high in Chinchambonmi feet from Route 18 to the north edge of Ridgeway's future development land, had quietly become part of the Whitcomb parcel, 7 years before Victor Sloan laughed at a child's map. Mara did not celebrate when she found it. She copied the page by hand, then she checked it again. For 6 months, she pulled every surrounding deed, every tax map revision, every title note from Sylvan's 1965 purchases. She hired a retired surveyor named Abel Price to walk the line with her. He brought a transit, 2 stakes, and the personality of a locked filing cabinet. After 3 hours, he stood at the north corner pin with mud on his boots and said, "This is ugly," Mara said. "Bad ugly or good ugly?" Abel looked across the bank's land. The ridge to the west rose too sharply for a commercial entrance. The creek bottom to the east had floodplain problems and 2 private owners who had never sold. The south boundary hit the county fairgrounds and Cemetery Road. Then he looked back at the 12-foot strip. "Expensive ugly," he said. The corridor was not impressive. It was too narrow to look powerful, but it was the legal keyhole for the entire north side of the bank's land. Not because 12 feet could carry a resort road by itself, but because every widening, every entrance permit, every utility plan, and every emergency access approval had to begin with a lawful connection at that line. Without the strip, the land was large. With it, the land was buildable. Mara went home that evening with mud on her hem and copies tucked under her arm. Her mother was making soup. "What did you find?" Ruth asked. Mara laid the release notice beside the colored pencil map she had saved since she was 10. "A road they forgot to own," she said. Ruth looked at the red line, then at Mara. "You going to tell them?" Mara shook her head. "I'm going to tell the courthouse." The next Monday, Mara filed a quiet title notice and a boundary memorandum at the Cedar County Clerk's office. 2 forms, $27. 1 stamped copy. Nothing dramatic, no threat letter, no newspaper, no call to the bank. She only made the corridor visible in the one place people like Victor Sloan were supposed to look. Then she went home and started a notebook. The first entry was dated March 6, 1978. All 4 pins found. West pin leaning, reset with able present. Tax office confirms separate line item. After that, the notebook filled slowly. Mara mowed the strip twice a year. She paid the parcel tax every spring. $8 in 1978. $11 in 1983. $19 by 1991. She kept every receipt in envelopes labeled by year. She walked the pins after heavy rain. She took photographs when survey flags appeared on Ridgway's side. She wrote down license plates when men in clean trucks parked too close to her fence. She did not chase them away. She documented them. That was her answer to every man who thought patience meant weakness. The first offer came in 1982. A young broker named Dennis Vale knocked on the farmhouse door with a smile he had practiced in the car. He said he represented a regional investment partnership interested in tidying up some access issues. He offered Cheen Numman for the strip, cash, quick close, no inconvenience. Mara invited him to stand on the porch because she was not letting his polished shoes into her kitchen. Then she said, "No, thank you." Dennis blinked. The number was more than her yearly wages at the feed office. He tried again. Mara said the same thing. His report to Ridgway said, "Owner appears sentimental, likely unsophisticated, may respond to personal pressure." He was wrong on all 3 important words. Mara was not sentimental about the strip. She was exact. In 1989, the second approach came through the county economic office. A man in a flat voice used the phrase "public benefit corridor" 4 times and offered Namitamganan. Mara asked him to put it in writing. He did. She filed the letter. Then she paid the tax bill the next April before she paid her own power bill. By 1996, Ridgway Land Trust had changed names twice. Sylvan sold its holdings to a holding company. The holding company became Ridgway North Properties. Ridgway North created 6 smaller LLCs that sounded unrelated until Mara traced the registered agent. Same office tower in Charlotte. Same suite number, same assistant signing annual reports. The land around her was no longer just pasture on a balance sheet. It had become a future golf resort, then a wellness village, then a conference center, then a mixed-use mountain retreat with villas, retail, and a lake that did not exist yet. Every version needed the north access. Every version found the same 12 feet. That year, Mara's daughter Leah was 13 and old enough to be annoyed by everything except mysteries. She rode with Mara one Saturday to check the corner pins. At the far end of the strip, Leah watched her mother brush leaves off an iron marker with the care most people saved for jewelry. "Why do you keep touching those?" Leah asked. "Because the pin tells the paper where to stand," Mara said. "What happens if it moves?" Mara looked toward Ridgway's empty fields. "Then somebody gets to pretend the truth moved." Leah wrote that down when they got home. Mara saw the notebook on her daughter's bed that night and said nothing. Some lessons work better when they think they were stolen. In June of 2001, Ridgway stopped sending brokers and sent counsel. Martin Kell arrived in a black sedan with a briefcase and a voice that treated politeness like a weapon. He did not ask to come in. He stepped into the kitchen as if the house had already agreed. Ruth had been gone 3 years by then. The kitchen was Mara's. She let him sit because standing would have made him feel more important than he was. Kell opened with Banchamir Gan. He called it generous. Then he called it final. Mara poured coffee into one mug and did not offer him any. "No," she said. Kel smiled without showing teeth. He mentioned future construction. He mentioned access disruptions. He mentioned that small isolated parcels sometimes became difficult to maintain once major development began. It was not a threat. It was an invitation to feel surrounded. Mara opened the desk drawer, took out a folder, and slid one photograph across the table. It showed Kel's own survey crew standing inside the 12-foot corridor 3 weeks earlier. Their boots were pressed into wet grass beside Mara's north pin. On the back, she had written the date, time, and license plate. Kel stopped smiling. Mara said, "If you come back, bring a better offer and a cleaner tone." He left with the photograph. That night, Leah asked what he wanted. Mara said, what they missed. Leah was 18 then, 2 weeks from leaving for college. She looked at the filing boxes stacked beside the desk. "Are you ever going to sell it?" "No." "Then what are you waiting for?" Mara looked out at the orchard. "For them to stop wanting it," she said, "and start needing it." Years passed. Ridgway tried other routes. They hired engineers to cut across the ridge. The grade failed. They explored the creek side. The floodplain report came back red and expensive. They tested the south approach through the fairgrounds. The county refused to sell because of the cemetery road and the annual livestock event. They studied a private road through the East Farms. One owner wanted a price that made the board laugh. The other would not answer mail. Every report returned to the same ugly fact. The land was almost perfect, except for the entrance. In 2010, Leah became a property rights attorney in Raleigh. Mara mailed her copies of the notebooks as a graduation gift. 4 volumes, rubber-banded. Every pin check, tax receipt, survey visit, offer letter, tire track, and phone call from 1978 forward. Leah called after reading the first volume. "Mom," she said, "normal people send flowers." Mara said flowers don't survive cross-examination. Leah laughed. Then she kept reading. By 2016, Ridgway's plan had grown bigger than any version before it. A luxury mountain resort, 2 hotels, a medical spa, 96 villas, retail space, a conference hall, a private lake dug from a pasture basin. The state had issued conditional entrance approval from Route 18. The county had preliminary zoning support. Ridgway had lenders, architects, contractors, and tenants. They also had a problem buried in their own title packet. Someone finally read the 1958 release. Someone finally saw Mara's 1978 filing. Someone finally understood that the child with the colored pencil map had grown into a woman with 4 decades of receipts. In February of 2017, Ridgway filed a dormant corridor challenge. Their argument sounded clean. The spur road had never been used as a public road. No pavement, no traffic, no active right-of-way. Therefore, they claimed, the corridor should be treated as abandoned access and folded into the larger surrounding estate. It was the kind of argument that worked when nobody had kept the boring paper alive. Mara had kept it alive for 39 years. The hearing was scheduled for March 2 at the Cedar County Administrative Office. Leah arrived 2 days early with a rolling suitcase, a legal pad, and her mother's notebook stacked in a banker's box. She spread everything across the kitchen table. The 1958 release, the 1978 quiet title filing, 39 property tax receipts, maintenance photographs, the surveyor, affidavit from Abel Price, 3 offer letters from Ridgway entities, 2 engineer route studies Ridgway had accidentally referenced in a zoning exhibit, and Mara's colored pencil map. Leah held the map for a long time. The paper had softened at the folds. The red line was still clear. "You saved this since the auction?" Mara nodded. Leah turned it over and read Silas's sentence. People laughed loudest at the line they missed. Leah set the map down carefully. "Do you know what this proves?" Mara said. "That your grandfather was stubborn." "No," Leah said. "It proves notice before intent. They can't say this was some surprise technicality." The line existed in the family record before they bought the land, then in public record after you filed. Their whole case depends on pretending nobody could have known. Mara looked at the boxes. Can they still win? Leah smiled for the first time that week. Not if the hearing officer can count. The hearing lasted 17 minutes. Ridgway's attorney spoke first. He used phrases like historic non-use, practical abandonment, integrated development parcel, and economic necessity. Leah waited. Then she placed 3 stacks in front of the hearing officer. The state release with the reversion language highlighted, the stamped 1978 filing, and 39 tax receipts clipped by decade. She did not raise her voice. She did not call Ridgway greedy. She did not tell the room about the auction. She only built the staircase and let the officer walk up it. The county taxed this strip as a separate Whitcomb interest every year, Leah said. My client paid every bill. Ridgway's own entities attempted to purchase it on multiple dates, which means they recognized separate ownership whenever they wanted a deal. No news as pavement is not abandonment of title. The hearing officer flipped through the receipts. He looked at Ridgway's attorney. You tried to buy it in 1982, the attorney said. A predecessor made an exploratory contact. And again in 1989, that was not a direct purchase agreement. And your client's counsel offered bond mooring in 2001. Silence. The officer closed the folder. You cannot purchase what you now say never existed. He ruled for Whitcomb. Ridgway's attorney was dialing before he reached the hallway. That was when Graham Voss called Mara at Sauzachine the next morning. By Monday, 3 people from Ridgway sat at Mara's kitchen table. Graham Voss, a development vice president named Elise Calder, and Martin Kell, older now, thinner, still carrying the same briefcase energy. Leah sat beside Mara with a legal pad. Mara had placed the colored pencil map in the center of the table. No frame, no glass, just paper. Voss began at $2.1 million for a clean sale. Leah said no. Calder moved to $2.8 million. Leah said no. Kell said $3.25 million was a final extraordinary offer for a 12-foot strip that could not possibly be worth more under any conventional valuation. Mara looked at him. That's your mistake, she said. You keep pricing land. I'm pricing the only door. The room went quiet. Leah slid 1 page across the table. The terms were simple. Ridgway would receive a permanent access easement over the 12-foot corridor, with defined improvement rights, subject to county approval, and orchard protection boundaries. Ridgway would not own the land. The Whitcomb family would retain title. The easement payment would be Sangin Tamcham per month, adjusted for inflation every 3 years, secured against the entire Ridgway North property so any future buyer inherited the obligation. The payment would transfer to Mara's heirs, in perpetuity. Kell objected to the security clause. Leah said, non-negotiable. Voss objected to the inflation adjustment. Leah said, non-negotiable. Calder objected to perpetuity. Mara finally spoke. You bought around us in 1965 because you believed time belonged to you. It doesn't. No one answered. The negotiation took 2 days. Ridgway tried to convert it into a lump sum 4 more times. They offered tax gross-ups. They offered a driveway improvement. They offered to buy the farmhouse and let Mara live there for life. Each offer made the same mistake. It assumed she wanted out. Mara wanted the orchard to remain the center of the map. On the 3rd afternoon, Ridgway signed. The easement was recorded at the Cedar County Clerk's office under 3 parcel numbers and 2 cross-references so no future title search could miss it without trying. The clerk, an older woman named Patrice, checked Mara's ID, looked at the last page and paused. Whitcomb, she said. Any relation to Silas? Mara signed her name, granddaughter. Patrice smiled a little. He used to come in here with a cigar box full of receipts. Mara looked up. He taught me boxes matter. After the signing, Mara walked to her truck alone. Leah stayed inside to collect certified copies. Rain had stopped. The pear trees were silver in the late light, and the 12-foot strip looked like nothing again. Just grass, just fence posts, just a narrow line beside an orchard. Mara opened the 5th notebook to the first blank page. She wrote the date. Then one sentence, easement recorded, the somtum due monthly, 73 trees still standing. The first check arrived on April 1, then May, then June, then every month after. Ridgeway built its entrance. Guests drove through stone columns and never knew the legal road beneath them still belonged to the woman in the farmhouse. The resort brochures showed mountains, spa rooms, lake views, and smiling couples holding wine glasses. They did not show the 12-foot strip. They did not show the colored pencil map. They did not show Victor Sloan laughing in a livestock hall, while a 10-year-old girl folded his mistake into her coat pocket. Years later, Leah asked her mother why she never framed the map. Mara said, "Because it was never art." What was it? Mara looked through the window at the orchard. "A receipt," she said. "Some men buy thousands of acres and still miss the only line that matters." Mara Whitcomb spent her life keeping that line visible, and in the end, the land bank did not lose because the strip was large. They lost because it was small enough to ignore and important enough to own them forever.